course, we're interested in President Trump's trial in Manhattan. He's rallying in Bronx today, right?
I know. That's going to be huge,
Wow.
as he says. Wow.
Closing arguments on Tuesday, and then the case goes to the jury. But the Biden trials are getting underway in the not-too-distant future as well. Don't forget about those. Wouldn't it be delicious if the only person convicted of federal crimes, or any crimes, between now and the election day is one baby boy Hunter Biden, the smartest man that Joe Biden knows, and not one former president. Anyway, the gun case, that goes to trial in June, and the tax evasion case, he's got a couple, goes to trial in September. And this is interesting. Well, a couple things are interesting about that. One is that the Hunter Biden laptop that had all the earmarks of a Russian misinformation, disinformation campaign
Yes.
is going to be entered into evidence by the prosecution in the gun case.
Ooh.
Oh, so it is real.
Yeah, and there might be crimes committed with some of those pictures. We don't know.
And the other thing is with respect to the tax evasion case, the CIA intervened to prevent IRS investigators from interviewing Kevin Morris. Patrick Morris, who's an associate of baby boy Hunter. The CIA tried to intervene to stop the interview. Jim Jordan and Jim Comer, writing in a letter, 2 DOJ officials were allegedly summoned to CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia, for a briefing regarding Mr. Morris. At the meeting, it was communicated that Mr. Morris could not be a witness during the investigation. The new documents show IRS whistleblowers Gary Shapley and Joseph Ziegler provided documents to the committee detailing the CIA's intervention, which, of course, they've sort of disclosed previously when they first came forward. But nonetheless, this sort of calls into question, demands renewed calls into question just exactly what the CIA was doing and why. Speaking of the Joe Obama years and skullduggery afoot, Republican Senators Chuck Grassley and Ron Johnson unveiled evidence yesterday that former Secretary of State John Kerry, why the long face, actively interfered with the FBI's attempts to arrest people suspected of being in the United States illegally to support Iran's efforts to create WMDs. They allegedly did so. John Kerry and his people, because you had to get that Iran nuclear deal signed that former President Obama signed, because, of course, Iran is one of our burgeoning new partners in peace, the lead sponsor of state terrorism the world over. And we're supposed to have faith in the federal criminal justice system, right? Isn't that the... otherwise, you're an insurrectionist or some such thing. Boy, oh boy. It's sort of a motley affair these days, isn't it? For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by our friend Julie Kelly. I got to make sure I got Julie's book and stuff here.
Oh,
where you got? Where's the rundown? Here we go. Yes. Julie Kelly, declassified as the author. The book is January 6th, How Democrats Use the Capitol Protest to Launch a War on Terror Against the Political Right. Julie, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Dan, why are you attacking our democracy?
I know.
And the rule of law.
I know. It's an affront because
gag order.
Because
we need to put a gag order on you.
Because
I'm not permitted to say these things.
I'm an insurrectionist, obviously. So what about these revelations about running interference for the mullahs in Iran? That was very nice of John Kerry. And then the CIA running interference for Hunter Biden.
It's impossible these days to get your arms around the totality of the corruption, the treachery, the treason of the people who are running this country right now. It's like whack-a-mole. I've been, immersed in classified documents stuff for a while, but especially the past few weeks. I was at the courthouse yesterday, and hearing even just the prosecutors, the government talk about these concocted cases where there's no accountability. I think that's the frustration, Dan and Amy. You know this. You hear this from your listeners all the time. When is someone going to be held accountable for what they're doing to destroy this country and destroy people in the process? It's very disheartening, to say the least.
What is just on the Trump side, because the whole, I mean, it's just hard to know. You have to get more disclosures to understand some of this initial reporting about John Kerry's interference on behalf of the Iranians, and even to some extent more with respect to the interference on behalf of Hunter Biden in terms of IRS investigators. But on the Trump side, for a minute, sort of as we're again preparing for closing arguments in that case, what's your review of all that has taken place in Manhattan and expectation for what happens maybe as soon as next week?
I think people are realizing, and I will say this too, as someone who's been covering all these January 6th court cases and now Trump, the judge is really such a decisive factor. And I think people also are waking up to the fact that our judiciary is another institution completely compromised and weaponized in so many instances. And this certainly is the case with Judge Juan Merchan, not just his antics in court, what we saw earlier, which is straight up jury tampering, right? So he gets irritated with Bob Costello, who's giving him the stink eye. Oh, okay, sorry, Judge, can you not handle that? Tells the jury to leave as he's scolding Bob Costello. So right away, this is the judge interfering, trying to convey to the jury that this man, this witness, and this was a defense witness for Trump, is not credible. You should disregard whatever he says. I mean, yes, this is appealable, but in the process, how much has this judge contributed to? I mean, he's another member of the prosecution team. He might as well just have a business card for the Manhattan DA's office. So how much is that going to play into what the jurors ultimately decide? And then he excuses them for an entire week?
I know.
That's another oddity. You just don't see that. If it's holiday weekend, that's one thing. But an entire week, so what? They can be identified and harassed and intimidated by who knows who to, vote the right way. Just a total farce.
Well, I mean, with this much time, there's much more opportunity, and they can do their own research. I mean, that nothing's going to stop them. They're not sequestered, so nothing's going to stop them from talking to their loved ones or going on social media and seeing what people are saying about this case, and that may shape their opinion when they have to vote or deliberate.
I totally agree, Amy. I mean, again, you have to think of the venue. This is almost like Washington, D.C., not as bad, but 85% of the residents of Manhattan in this particular area voted for Joe Biden. It's a highly Democrat, highly partisan section of another highly Democrat city, New York City. So, of course, there's going to be pressure from friends and family. You think these people are walking around incognito? No, I'm not a juror. Of course they're not. So this could be the only chance this year to get a criminal conviction of Donald Trump, regardless of the inanity of the charges before him. And if these jurors recognize this, and we know that there are partisans on the jury already in the jury selection, this could pose a real danger to Donald Trump.
In the classified docs case, of course, the revelation this week about the filings, about the papers put together pre-raid by the FBI that included, the sort of pro forma law enforcement officers have the right to use deadly force as warranted, and then there's the limits of the use of force restrictions and so forth. That was characterized by the FBI as just like the same sort of paperwork. Yeah, that's included in any sort of pre-raid logistics and contingencies planning. I mean, I saw some like Human Events saying like an assassination attempt. That strikes me as a little bit over the top. I mean, I'm certainly no defender of Jim Comey or Christopher Wray's FBI, and even some of the rank and file agents. But I mean, that's a little bit overheated, more than a little bit, actually. I think, don't you?
I do. I do. I don't agree with that assessment that this was an attempted assassination effort. But I will say, and I'm doing a deep dive into this, and I'll have a piece on my Substack, Declassified with Julie Kelly, this weekend. The people who ran this are very dangerous people. This is Matthew Olson, the head of the National Security Division appointed by Joe Biden. Jay Bratt, who I saw in court yesterday, he was head of DOJ's counterintelligence unit. He helped concoct this documents case. George Toscas, Crossfire Hurricane veteran, helped protect Hillary Clinton during the DOJ investigation into her email server. These are the dirtiest people you can possibly have at DOJ. This wasn't even a Chris Wray operation. This was led by the top officials at Joe Biden's Department of Justice, in many instances overriding what the Washington Field Office, FBI chief of the Washington Field Office, Stephen D'Antuono. This is the guy who actually is emerging as a good guy, and he ran the Whitmer Fednapping hoax before he was promoted to Washington. There was huge dispute as to how this raid was going to go down. So, and it could have been a dangerous situation, and I'll tell you why. They also took the extraordinary step, aside from this entire raid being concocted by top DOJ officials, including Merrick Garland. They showed up in street clothes, basically. They were instructed, 30 armed FBI agents, to go into Mar-a-Lago dressed in regular clothes. They had top DOJ officials on site, also highly unusual, who were told to wear business attire. But yet they were armed with their standard firearms, ammunition, handcuffs, bolt cutters. This was not just executing a raid, a warrant for government papers. This really could have descended into something really dangerous, a blue-on-blue situation, because, of course, you had armed Secret Service agents on the property as well.
Well, yeah, I saw that, and Bongino was making that case, too. And we asked James Burnham yesterday, who was former Assistant Attorney General under Barr, about that. And it's sort of my read, too. If you look at the documents, I know you posted them. I mean, it talks about liaisoning with the Secret Service. So there was like a recognition that and one assumes, I don't know, but one assumes that there was conversation with the Secret Service about here's what we're going to do. I mean, because it didn't happen, so there must have been some conversation before you just show up en masse with Secret Service, so they have an idea what DOJ and FBI is doing, right?
According to reports, the Secret Service was notified a few hours before.
Okay.
But Dan, what if Donald Trump had flown down to Mar-a-Lago from New Jersey, where he was from? He does have his own plane. He shows up at Mar-a-Lago at noon as armed agents are ransacking his wife's bedroom suite, and he stands in front of the FBI and says, "No, you're not going in my wife's suite. No, you're not going in my son's bedroom," which is what they did.
Right.
We have more evidence of that this week. This could have escalated into a very dangerous situation. So anyone who's saying, wait a second. So anyone who's saying, oh, no, this never would have happened, you can't say, because there's no precedent. There are many things that could have gone wrong.
Well, what was the plan that, how agents were supposed to handle potential use of deadly force?
They just had the guidance as to how to use.
Yeah, well, they always have that. I mean, they always have the right to use deadly force if it's warranted. I mean, that's what I'm saying. It's nothing new. And I mean, look, the raid situation, just like executing any search warrant, and this is separate and distinct from whether the raid was legitimate, which it wasn't. But this is separate and distinct.
But it can't be separate and distinct, Dan.
No.
It can't be.
No, well, yeah, it can be. The raid shouldn't have happened, but when it's green lighted. I mean, this is not executing a search warrant, executing a raid. They secure the property. So if Trump or family members show up, then they're just like lawyers showing up. We're not going to talk to you, or you have to stand over here.
Wait, that's not true, because there are special laws that pertain to former presidents and protectees of Secret Service. He is not a lawyer or a regular person showing up at his own property. He is a former president who's protected by specific statutes and people who pose threats to him.
Yes,
That's
but you, I know it's not normal because of that difference, because the Secret Service is on site, but you just conceded the point that Secret Service had notice. So there was agreement about what was going to happen and how it was going to transpire, because there certainly wasn't a shootout between Secret Service and FBI. So, I mean, I don't think there's a need to. I think the focus should be on whether the raid was legitimate and what the real purpose of that raid was. The purpose of the raid wasn't to to have a blue on blue situation or to jeopardize anybody's life. The purpose was to communicate to the public that this is public enemy number one, and look what we have to do to bring this guy to justice and make a big show of he's public enemy number one, to convince people that this is a legitimate, serious operation and this man is a threat to democracy. I mean, that was the purpose of the raid.
That's correct. But then but you can't dismiss the potential for violence or danger or threat to staff or anyone else who was there. You had armed Secret Service agents who are tasked with protecting the president and his former president and his family. You have rogue FBI agents, including 4 from the Washington field office who never should have even been there. The entire operation was run out of Washington instead of the proper jurisdiction of Southern Florida. Everything from start to finish related to this raid is unusual. There's nothing standard operating procedure about it. So, but Dan, why were they told then to show up in regular T-shirts and pants? You're not identified as FBI agents? Is that normal for someone executing a search warrant? It's not.
Well, I understand, but I mean, but so what's the insinuation? I mean, they weren't doing it. It wasn't like a subterranean operation. Secret Service was notified. They brought overwhelming presence to the site. So what's the insinuation then?
The insinuation is that they created a situation that could have descended into some type of danger, posed danger to Donald Trump if he showed up, to staff who was there. To your point, for nothing. This was not to get documents. This was a stunt.
Yeah, I agree with that.
In the process of this stunt, they created a potentially dangerous situation for nothing more than optics. That is, I don't care about the deadly use of force policy, that's standard operating procedure, great. The point is that they had that in the operations order to demonstrate that they could have used lethal force for a stunt. That's the problem.
You also posted this week, too, about these chain of custody issues with respect to the documents recovered. And in point of fact, that some of the documents for which he has been indicted for possessing or for not returning actually may have been sent to him by the General Services Administration.
Correct. So here's the other outgrowth of this bungled, potentially dangerous stunt that the FBI pulled. It has been completely bungled since then. So Jack Smith has had to come back, and I was at the courthouse yesterday for 2 hearings. He's had to come back and tell Judge Cannon, oh, by the way, I know we told you that all the evidence we collected is in its original sequence because they took like 30 some odd boxes that allegedly had classified documents. But the evidence has been disturbed since we took those boxes from Mar-a-Lago and flew them to Washington. Furthermore, I think we talked about, they brought cover sheets talking about this stunt. They exacerbated the stunt. They brought cover sheets that made it look like, the big red cover sheet, classified, top secret. FBI agents brought those cover sheets with them to this armed raid, clipped them to various folders and files, and took that infamous picture at Mar-a-Lago to make it look like that's how the documents were found. Those cover sheets were also allegedly used as placeholders. If they took a box from Mar-a-Lago, they said, oh, there's a paper with 300 other papers that has classified markings. They would take that out, give it to the investigators, put this placeholder sheet in there. What Jack Smith just had to come back with and tell Judge Cannon, oh, in some instances, we can't locate the classified file that is supposed to relate to that placeholder. So they conducted the stunt at Mar-a-Lago in August of 2022. They brought unidentified armed agents, top DOJ officials, by the way, an official from FBI headquarters, which of course none of this ever happens with any other raid. And in the process, they completely mishandled and spoiled evidence that they want to use against in this espionage case against Trump.
Do you think there's any way this comes to trial before the election?
No, because as you and I think we've all talked about Judge Cannon.
Yeah.
She's so courageous, one woman wrecking crew. She is going to torment Jack Smith and the DOJ because she continues to, as we saw this week, unseal this material. Dan and Amy, they never thought this operations order would see the light of day. There has been no confirmation ever from the DOJ or any reporting, Washington Post, New York Times, that these agents were armed and had lethal force authority. They never thought these documents would see the day. So she's also continuing all of these hearings, which I saw yesterday. It will be death by 1,000 cuts, this case. And I don't think it will go to trial before the election.
Julie Kelly, her Substack is Declassified with Julie Kelly. Look forward to her continued reporting on the topics we discussed. Also, pick up her book, January 6th, How Democrats Used the Capitol Protest to Launch a War on Terror Against the Political Right. Julie, thank you as always.
Thanks, guys. Have a good weekend.
You too, and she joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line. Coming up on Chicago's Morning Answer.
We'll talk to New York Post columnist Michael Goodwin about Biden's potential June swoon, 8:38.
But now into the newsroom we go. Here's Mike Scott.
8:32, we're following a developing story in Texas where the central Texas town of Temple was slammed by a tornado late last night that left widespread damage now visible by daylight. 30 homes heavily damaged or destroyed, damage to the Temple Mall and many other businesses.